In the dense heart of the Congo Basin, the jungle breathed with life. Towering trees filtered sunlight into golden shafts that danced across the forest floor. Birds called overhead, insects buzzed like tiny engines, and the underbrush rustled with unseen movements. But on one humid morning, the jungle heard a sound it did not recognize, a human cry. It was faint at first, barely more than a whimper, but to the ears of one listener, it was unmistakable. A massive silverback gorilla named Kumba paused mid-step. His dark eyes scanned the foliage, nostrils flared as he sniffed the air. The troop around him moved on, foraging and grooming, uninterested. But Kumba turned back. Something compelled him, an instinct deeper than reason. Nestled in a shallow wicker basket, barely protected by a torn piece of fabric, lay a baby girl. Her cheeks were streaked with dirt, her cries weakening. There was no one else, no scent of mother, no trace of other humans nearby, just the silence of abandonment. Kumba stepped closer. His shadow fell across the basket. He could have turned away. He could have left her, a strange creature not of his world. But instead, the giant knelt. He grunted softly, a low rumble of curiosity. The baby blinked up at him, tiny fingers waving. And then, she reached out. In that moment, something shifted in Kumba's heart. He reached for her, massive hands impossibly gentle, and lifted the baby from the basket. She did not scream. She nestled against his chest like she had always belonged there. The jungle watched. The birds grew quiet. Kumba carried her back to the troop. The reaction was immediate. The others were wary, even hostile. The females barked and grunted nervously, some backing away. But Kumba was the alpha, and when he placed the baby down in the center of the clearing, then sat beside her with a firm glare, the others understood. She was his now. Over the coming days, the girl, later known as Lina, began to adapt. The troop sniffed her, poked her, observed her odd ways, but she laughed when the juveniles tumbled near her and cooed when the mothers groomed. She learned to crawl over roots, to splash in rivers, to chew on bark and berries. And Kumba? He watched over her like a guardian spirit. At night, she curled against his chest, his massive arm draped protectively over her tiny form. He taught her how to crack nuts with stones, how to listen for danger, how to climb the giant fig trees. Lina didn't learn words. She learned grunts, gestures, expressions. She learned safety not through bars or walls, but through the presence of a giant who would give his life for her without question. In the wild, she was an orphan. But with Kumba, she was something more. She was family. Time passed, and Lina grew. The jungle, once a terrifying and foreign place, had become her home. The towering trees no longer seemed like intimidating giants, but companions that whispered ancient secrets. The ground beneath her feet, once uneven and harsh, now felt familiar, soft in some places, solid in others. By the time Lina was 7, she had become as wild as the creatures she lived among. She no longer crawled on all fours like the young gorillas. She moved with their fluidity, running, climbing, swinging from the branches as easily as any of them. Her tiny hands, once clumsy, now held the strength to rip open fruit, grasp a branch tightly enough to swing from tree to tree, and even to crack open nuts with a stone. Just like the gorillas. Kumba, ever watchful, had taken on the role of her guardian, but it was more than that. He was her teacher, her protector, her constant. His massive presence was a comforting force in the ever-shifting world of the jungle. Lina would sit on the ground, watching as he showed her how to gather food, how to search for the ripest fruit, how to avoid the dangerous plants. He would grunt in his deep, rumbling voice, guiding her with his gestures. The troop, initially skeptical of this strange human child among them, had slowly accepted her into their fold. The younger gorillas, with their boundless energy, would race around her, tumbling in the dirt, while Lina would laugh, mimicking their playful growls. She would copy their movements, her body learning the rhythm of the jungle as it responded to her every command. As the days turned to months, the bond between Lina and the troop deepened. She learned the calls of the animals, the songs of the birds, the warnings of the monkeys high in the trees. When a storm would roll in, she would shelter beneath Kumba's broad chest, the rain washing over them. But he would hold her close, never letting her feel the cold. Lina had no memory of her past life. The world of humans was a distant and hazy concept, one that never seemed to make sense. The jungle was her reality. She belonged to it. It belonged to her. The scent of the wet earth, the rustling of the leaves, the sounds of Kumba's soft growls. These were the things she knew, the things that kept her grounded. And Kumba, ever her protector, kept her safe. He would make sure she was never too far from the troop. He would show her where danger lurked and how to avoid it. They had become a perfect team, the gorilla and the girl. In the heat of the day, Lina would sometimes curl up in the sun, Kumba resting beside her, his massive body a shield from the world. At night, when the jungle quieted down and the stars began to fill the sky, Lina would lie against Kumba, staring up at the endless expanse above. He would wrap his strong arms around her, his presence offering more comfort than any blanket ever could. The sound of his deep breathing would lull her to sleep, and the jungle would sing its lullaby. But the most important lesson of all, the lesson she would carry with her forever, was trust. She trusted Kumba to always be there. She trusted the jungle to provide. She trusted that she was safe. She was no longer an abandoned child in a harsh world. She was a part of something greater, something ancient and unspoken. She had found her place. In the quiet moments, the stillness of the night, Lina would whisper her name to herself. Lina. She knew that name meant something, though she could not remember why. But it didn't matter. Here in the jungle, with Kumba by her side, she had everything she needed. The past no longer held a grip on her. She was home. The peace of the jungle shattered one morning when strange noises filled the air. The familiar sounds of birds and rustling leaves were replaced by the sharp crack of gunfire. The ground trembled as a group of armed poachers descended into the heart of the jungle. They had come for the gorillas, the rare and magnificent creatures that roamed freely through the trees. But in their wake, they would disturb much more than that. Kumba heard the gunshots first, his ears twitching at the sound. He instantly recognized the danger. The troops scattered, moving quickly and silently through the trees, disappearing into the dense foliage. But Kumba did not leave. He stood tall, his eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon. The poachers had not come just for the gorillas. They had come for something far more precious. Lina was playing near the edge of the clearing, watching the young gorillas chase each other through the tall grass. She turned, sensing something was wrong. Kumba's posture had changed. His shoulders were tense, his eyes fixed on the distance. He grunted softly, a low rumble of warning. Before she could react, a shot rang out, echoing through the trees. Lina froze. Kumba's roar followed almost immediately, a thunderous sound that reverberated through the jungle, a primal warning to anyone who dared to harm his family. He ran toward the source of the noise, with Lina following closely behind, her small feet stumbling to keep up. As they neared the edge of their territory, the air grew thick with tension. The poachers were close now, their presence unmistakable. They had set up traps and nets, and the jungle had fallen into a dissonant silence. The natural order had been disrupted. Kumba charged, his massive frame crashing through the underbrush. He barreled into the poachers, knocking one of them to the ground with a force that could have shattered bones. But the poachers were prepared. They fired their weapons again, aiming for Kumba. He roared in pain as a bullet grazed his arm, but he did not back down. His focus remained on protecting Lina and the rest of the troop. Lina, terrified but instinctively knowing what to do, darted behind a nearby tree. Her eyes were wide with fear as she watched the battle unfold. She could hear the frantic shouts of the poachers, but they were drowned out by Kumba's powerful roars. He fought with everything he had, every muscle in his body dedicated to keeping his family safe. But then, the unthinkable happened. A tranquilizer dart hit Kumba in the side. His massive body staggered for a moment before he fell to the ground, his eyes still locked on Lina. He let out a final, mournful growl, but his strength was fading. The poachers quickly rushed forward, capturing the gorilla as he slipped into unconsciousness. Lina screamed Kumba's name, her heart breaking as she watched the life drain from him. The poachers moved swiftly, securing him in nets, preparing to transport him back to the city, where he would be locked away in a cage. Lina ran toward him, desperate to reach him, but one of the poachers grabbed her, pulling her away. "No!" she cried, struggling against the man's grip, but it was no use. Her small frame was nothing compared to the poacher's strength. The tranquilizer had taken hold, and Kumba could do nothing to stop it. The poachers, now successful in their mission, turned their attention to Lina. They tranquilized her too, and in a haze, she felt herself being lifted from the ground. The last thing she saw was Kumba, still unconscious, being loaded into a truck. Her heart ached, and for the first time in years, she felt alone. The jungle, her home, seemed so far away. The familiar sounds of the forest faded as the truck pulled away, and the memories of Kumba's comforting presence seemed like a distant dream. The jungle fell silent again. Years passed, and Lina slowly adjusted to the world beyond the jungle, but it was never truly her world. The people around her, the sterile walls of the institutions, the constant attempt to civilize her, it all felt wrong. She was different now, shaped by the jungle, by Kumba. Lina, now 22, had grown into an intelligent young woman, educated in the ways of the world, or at least the world they wanted her to understand. But deep inside, the longing never faded. She knew, with every fiber of her being, that something was missing. She had been told stories about her past, about the life she had once had before the jungle, but the details were blurry. The memories of her time with Kumba, of the life she had known there, felt more real than anything the world tried to offer her. The city, the people, the noise. It all felt so foreign, so loud, so hollow. The dreams never stopped. Dreams of the jungle, of the trees that stretched to the sky, of the sound of Kumba's deep grunts, his protective presence beside her as they slept. She could still feel the weight of his arms around her, the safety he had provided. But now, all of that seemed like a lifetime ago. A part of her, the wild part that had been shaped by the jungle, still called out to the life she had lost. It was while she was studying primatology, fascinated by gorillas, their behavior, and their connection to humans, that she first heard the rumors. There were whispers in the conservation world about a mysterious silverback, older, yet with a strange kindness to humans. His name was Kumba. The news hit Lina like a thunderbolt. She had to know, she had to find him. The report said Kumba had been spotted in a remote region of the jungle, far from human settlements. But the sightings were rare, the area difficult to access. The authorities who had taken her as a child had never once mentioned where Kumba had gone after the poaching. They had assumed he was lost, taken by the wilds or the humans. But Lina knew differently. He was alive. She could feel it. With a fierce determination, Lina set out. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She gathered what little she could, enough for an expedition into the heart of the jungle. Armed with only her knowledge of the jungle, of Kumba, of the ways of the wild, she plunged into the depths of the forest, where the light barely reached the ground. Every step felt familiar. The smell of the earth, the songs of the birds, the rustling of the trees above her. It was as if she had never left. The jungle welcomed her back, wrapping her in its embrace. But there was also something else, a feeling that tugged at her, like an invisible thread connecting her to something far away, something she couldn't see yet. For days, she pushed forward, navigating through thick vines and overgrown paths. The jungle was a maze, its labyrinthine passages winding in every direction. But she didn't care. She knew she was close. She could feel it in her bones. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Lina heard a sound. It was distant at first, but unmistakable. A deep, rumbling growl. It echoed through the trees, reverberating in her chest. Her heart raced. She recognized that sound. Kumba. The moment the growl reached her ears, a flood of memories rushed back. Lina's pulse quickened, and her feet moved without thinking. She pushed through the dense undergrowth, branches slapping at her face, her heart pounding with each step. The jungle seemed to open up around her as she followed the sound, the growl growing louder, more distinct. The dense trees began to thin, and the ground beneath her feet turned softer, almost familiar. It was like the jungle itself was guiding her, pulling her towards something or someone. And then, there he was. Kumba? He stood at the edge of a clearing, his massive frame unmistakable. The silver fur on his back glowed faintly in the dying light of the day. His eyes, though aged, still held that same depth, that same intensity that Lina remembered. He was older now, his face showing signs of time, wrinkles beneath his eyes, more silver streaking through his fur. But to Lina, he was still the same. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The jungle fell completely silent, as if holding its breath. Lina's body trembled with a mix of awe and fear. Was he real? Could this really be happening? Was Kumba truly alive? Kumba's dark eyes locked onto hers. There was a flicker of recognition in them, a moment where time seemed to stop. For a brief second, the world around them vanished, and there was only Kumba and Lina. The girl who had grown up by his side in the jungle, now a woman, standing before him once again. Then, Kumba stepped forward. Lina took a tentative step toward him, unsure, but the moment her foot hit the ground, Kumba let out a soft grunt. It was the same sound he used to make, a sound of reassurance, of familiarity. He lowered his head slightly, as if giving her permission to approach. With a sudden burst of emotion, Lina ran the final distance, throwing herself into his arms. She felt the warmth of his massive body, the comfort of his embrace as his strong arms wrapped around her. For the first time in years, Lina felt safe again. She felt home. Kumba's deep, gentle growl rumbled as if acknowledging her presence. She buried her face in his fur, her hands trembling as she stroked the familiar texture. It was like nothing had changed. It was like no time had passed. "I thought I lost you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Kumba pulled her closer, his giant hand resting on her back as though he was telling her that he would never leave her again. The moment was indescribable. Too many years apart, too much lost time. But in that instant, it didn't matter. They had found each other again. The jungle, the memories, their bond. It all came rushing back in a wave of emotion. Kumba let out another low growl, one that was not filled with the threat of danger, but with relief. The tension in the air melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of reunion. Lina felt tears streaming down her face as she held on tighter, unwilling to let go. For the first time in years, the pain of her past seemed to vanish. The orphaned girl, the one who had been abandoned and alone, had finally come home. And Kumba, the giant silverback who had once taken her in as his own, was there once again to protect her, to guide her, and to be the family she had lost. They were together, and nothing else mattered.